The wind screamed through the mountain pass at 200 kilometers per hour, and Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison had exactly 4 minutes of oxygen left in his emergency tank. His shuttle had gone down 3 hours ago, torn apart by the atmospheric turbulence that made this planet a certified death trap for anything smaller than a heavy cruiser. The distress beacon was transmitting, but rescue was at least 6 hours away. He would be frozen solid in 20 minutes. Jake pushed through the white wall of ice and snow, his thermal suit already failing in the minus 80-degree temperature. His fingers had stopped hurting 10 minutes ago. That was a bad sign. He knew the stages of hypothermia intimately from survival training, and he was entering the final phase. Then he saw the cave. It was barely visible through the blizzard, just a darker shadow against the white cliff face. Jake stumbled toward it, his legs burning with exhaustion. He fell twice, the second time nearly giving up entirely. But survival instinct drove him forward, and he crawled the last 10 meters on hands and knees. The cave entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for his shoulders. He squeezed through, scraping his suit against the rock, and collapsed onto the stone floor inside. The wind still howled behind him, but the worst of it was blocked. He might survive another hour in here. Maybe 2. Jake activated his suit's emergency heating coils, burning through the last of his power reserves. The warmth spread through his core, bringing feeling back to his extremities. Agonizing pins and needles raced through his hands and feet. He sat up slowly, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. That was when he realized he was not alone. The alien woman stood at the back of the cave, pressed against the far wall like a cornered animal. Her skin was pale blue, almost translucent, with delicate patterns of bioluminescence running along her arms and neck. Her eyes were enormous, taking up nearly a third of her face, and they were fixed on Jake with an expression of absolute terror. She was Valorian. Jake recognized the species immediately. The Valorian Collective had been humanity's trading partners for almost 50 years. They were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful scholars and scientists, physically fragile but intellectually brilliant. They were also known to be completely terrified of humans. Jake raised his hands slowly, trying to appear non-threatening. His translator implant crackled to life, picking up her rapid, panicked breathing and the soft whimpers escaping her throat. She said something in her native language, too fast for the translator to process. Then she said it again, louder, her voice cracking with fear. The translator finally caught up. "Please do not eat me." Jake blinked. That was not what he had expected. "I am not going to eat you," he said, keeping his voice calm and steady. "I am stranded here, same as you. My shuttle crashed in the storm." The alien woman did not relax. If anything, she pressed herself harder against the wall, as if trying to phase through the solid rock. Her bioluminescent patterns pulsed rapidly, a sign of extreme stress in her species. "You are human," she said, the translator rendering her words in a flat, mechanical tone. "Humans are predators. I have seen the documentaries. I have read the research papers. Your species hunts for recreation. You consume the flesh of other creatures. You have 2 forward-facing eyes specifically evolved for tracking prey." Jake looked at her for a long moment. Then, despite everything, despite the cold still seeping into his bones and the very real possibility that he would die in this cave, he laughed. The alien woman flinched at the sound. "Okay," Jake said, lowering his hands slowly. "First of all, I am not going to hurt you. Second of all, yes, humans are omnivores, but we do not eat sentient beings. That would be incredibly illegal and also disgusting. And third, I really need to sit down before I pass out." He slumped against the cave wall, exhaustion finally catching up to him. The alien woman watched him with those huge, terrified eyes, not moving a single muscle. Outside, the blizzard continued to rage. The alien woman did not move for almost 20 minutes. Jake sat against his section of wall, trying to conserve body heat, watching her through half-closed eyes. His suit's power reserves were nearly depleted, and the cold was starting to creep back in. Finally, she spoke again. "Why are you not attacking me?" "Because I am not a monster," Jake said. "Why would I attack you?" She seemed genuinely confused by the question. "Because you can. Because I am smaller and weaker. Because that is what predators do." Jake shook his head slowly. "That is not how humans work. We do not attack people just because we can. Most of us, anyway. There are always exceptions in any species." The alien woman considered this for a long moment. Her bioluminescent patterns had slowed their pulsing, though they had not stopped entirely. "I am called Lyra. I am a xenobiologist with the Valorian Science Directorate. My research vessel crashed in the storm approximately 4 standard hours ago." "Jake Morrison," Jake said, "Lieutenant Commander, United Earth Navy. My shuttle went down about 3 hours back. Rescue is on the way, but it is going to be a while." Lyra's enormous eyes widened even further. "You have rescue coming?" "Standard protocol," Jake said. "Every naval vessel has emergency beacons. My ship detected the crash and scrambled a search team. They should be here in about 5 hours, assuming the storm does not get worse." Lyra made a sound that the translator rendered as distressed vocalization. "My beacon was destroyed in the crash. I have been trying to survive long enough to reach the lowlands, where the weather might be clear enough to signal for help." Jake studied her for a moment. She was wearing some kind of thin environmental suit, clearly designed for temperate conditions rather than Arctic survival. The fact that she had lasted 4 hours in this blizzard was remarkable. "Well," he said, "looks like you found help. When my people get here, we will make sure you get picked up too." Lyra stared at him with an expression that Jake could not quite read. Her species had very different facial structures than humans, and their emotional displays did not always translate clearly. But if he had to guess, he would say she looked shocked. "You would help me?" she asked. "Even though I am not human?" "Of course," Jake said. "Why would that matter?" "Because we are different species. Because helping me provides no benefit to you. Because I cannot offer you anything in return." Jake laughed again, and this time Lyra did not flinch quite as badly. "You have a really bleak view of the universe, you know that? Helping people is not about getting something in return. It is about doing the right thing." Lyra was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "The research papers did not mention this aspect of human behavior." "What research papers?" "The ones published by the collective Xenopsychology Institute," Lyra said. "They are very thorough. They document human aggression, human territorial behavior, human pack hunting strategies, human persistence predation techniques." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Persistence predation?" "Yes. The practice of pursuing prey over long distances until it collapses from exhaustion. Humans are apparently one of the only species in the galaxy capable of this. Most predators rely on ambush tactics or short bursts of speed. Humans simply follow their target until it cannot run anymore." Jake considered this. "Okay, that is actually true. Our ancestors did hunt that way. But that was thousands of years ago. We have grocery stores now." Lyra did not seem reassured. The documentary showed humans engaging in something called a marathon, running for over 40 kilometers without stopping, for recreation. Jake opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. "That is also true," he admitted. But that does not mean we are going to chase you. The conversation was interrupted by a sudden gust of wind that penetrated even the shelter of the cave. Jake shivered violently, his suit's heating system sputtering and dying completely. The temperature inside the cave was dropping rapidly. Lyra noticed his distress. "Your thermal regulation system is failing." "Yeah," Jake said through chattering teeth. "Power cells are dead. I am going to have to rely on good old mammalian endothermy from here on out." Lyra tilted her head, a gesture that looked strange with her alien physiology. "Your species generates internal body heat." Jake nodded, wrapping his arms around himself. "Standard feature for Earth-based mammals. It is not going to be enough in these temperatures, though. I need to find some way to insulate myself, or I am going to be in serious trouble." He looked around the cave, searching for anything he could use. There were some dried plant materials near the entrance, probably blown in by the wind. Not enough to make a real difference, but better than nothing. Then Lyra did something unexpected. She walked toward him. Jake froze, surprised by the sudden movement. Lyra stopped about 2 meters away, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing rapidly again. "I have emergency thermal blankets in my survival kit," she said. "They are designed for Valorian physiology, but they should provide some insulation for your species as well." She reached into a pouch at her belt and pulled out a thin, silvery sheet. It looked almost exactly like the emergency blankets Jake was familiar with from human survival gear. Lyra held it out toward him, her arm trembling slightly. Whether from cold or fear, Jake could not tell. "Thank you," he said, taking the blanket carefully. "I appreciate it." Lyra retreated immediately, putting distance between them again. But she did not go all the way back to her original position against the far wall. She stopped about halfway, watching him with those enormous eyes. Jake wrapped the thermal blanket around his shoulders. It was not as effective as his suit's heating system had been, but it was definitely better than nothing. The reflective material trapped his body heat, creating a small pocket of warmth. "You did not have to do that," he said. "You are going to die if your core temperature drops too low," Lyra said. "I have studied human physiology. I know the symptoms of hypothermia. If you die, I will be alone again, and I do not know if I can survive until the storm passes." Jake smiled slightly. "So you are helping me because it benefits you?" Lyra hesitated. "I am helping you because it is the right thing to do." Jake looked at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, a genuine laugh this time, warm despite the cold. "Now you are getting it." The hours passed slowly. The blizzard showed no signs of letting up, and the temperature inside the cave continued to drop. Jake and Lyra huddled in their respective corners, trying to conserve heat. Lyra began asking questions. At first, they were practical questions about human survival capabilities, probably trying to assess whether Jake was going to last until rescue arrived. But gradually, they became more personal. "Why did you join the military?" she asked at one point. Jake shrugged under his thermal blanket. "My father was Navy. My grandfather, too. It is kind of a family tradition. Plus, I wanted to see the galaxy. Not many other ways to do that for a kid from Nebraska." "Nebraska?" "It is a region on Earth, mostly flat. Lots of farms. Not very exciting." Lyra made a sound that the translator rendered as thoughtful vocalization. "On Valoria, military service is considered primitive, a remnant of less evolved times. We have not had organized armed forces for over 3,000 years." Jake raised an eyebrow. "How do you defend yourselves?" "We do not," Lyra said simply. "We have no natural predators. Our planet is temperate and resource-rich. We never develop the need for violence, Jake thought about this for a moment. But you have contact with other species now. Species that might not be as peaceful. Lyra's bioluminescent patterns flickered. Yes, this has been a source of considerable debate within the collective. Some believe we should develop defensive capabilities. Others argue that doing so would fundamentally change our nature as a species. So far, the traditionalists have prevailed. And what do you think? Lyra was quiet for a long moment. I think I am currently stranded on a frozen planet in the middle of a blizzard, and the only reason I might survive is because a human predator decided to share his rescue beacon with me. I am beginning to question some of my previous assumptions about the universe. Jake smiled. That is probably healthy. A little skepticism never hurt anyone. The conversation continued, ranging across topics from Valorian art to human sports to the nature of consciousness. Jake found himself genuinely enjoying Lyra's company. She was intelligent and curious, and her perspective on the universe was fascinatingly different from his own. At some point, he realized that she had stopped flinching every time he moved. Progress. The rescue shuttle arrived 6 hours and 23 minutes after Jake's crash. By that point, the blizzard had finally begun to subside, and the cave had gotten cold enough that both Jake and Lyra were starting to show signs of serious hypothermia. The shuttle's sensors detected 2 life signs inside the cave, and the pilot made the decision to attempt a landing on the narrow ledge outside. It was a risky maneuver in the lingering winds, but the alternative was watching 2 people freeze to death. The shuttle touched down with a heavy thump, and a moment later the rear hatch opened. 2 figures in heavy environmental suits emerged, their headlamps cutting through the swirling snow. Lieutenant Commander Morrison, the lead figure, called out, "Search and rescue." "Are you injured?" Jake struggled to his feet, his muscles stiff from hours of inactivity and cold. "I am okay. Hypothermic but functional. I have a Valorian national with me. She needs medical attention." The rescue team exchanged a glance. "Copy that, sir. We have room for both of you." Jake turned back to Lyra, who was watching the rescue team with wide eyes. Her bioluminescent patterns were pulsing rapidly again, but this time Jake thought he could detect something different in the rhythm. Not quite fear. Something more like wonder. "Come on," he said, holding out his hand. "Time to go." Lyra stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment. In Valorian culture, physical contact between strangers was extremely rare. It was considered invasive, a violation of personal boundaries. But she had just spent 6 hours talking to this human, this predator who had shared his rescue beacon, who had laughed at her fears without mocking them, who had treated her like a person rather than a potential meal. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached out and took his hand. Jake's grip was firm but gentle, his mammalian body heat radiating through the thin material of her glove. He helped her to her feet and guided her toward the shuttle, keeping himself between her and the howling wind. The rescue team's medic immediately wrapped Lyra in a heated blanket and began checking her vital signs. A second medic did the same for Jake, muttering about frostbite and core temperature levels. The shuttle lifted off, leaving the frozen cave behind. Through the viewport, Jake watched the blizzard-shrouded mountains fall away, replaced by the star-filled blackness of space. Lyra was seated across from him, still wrapped in her heated blanket. The color was starting to return to her skin, her bioluminescent pattern settling into a calm, steady rhythm. "Thank you," she said quietly. Jake shrugged. "Like I said, it is what humans do." Lyra shook her head. "No, the research papers were not entirely wrong. Humans are capable of tremendous violence. I have seen the historical records, wars that killed millions, weapons that could destroy entire planets. Your species has a capacity for destruction that terrifies the rest of the galaxy." She paused, her enormous eyes meeting his. "But the research papers were incomplete," she continued. "They documented human aggression, but they failed to document human compassion, human loyalty, human willingness to risk their own lives to save strangers. These traits are equally fundamental to your species, are they not?" Jake considered the question carefully. "I suppose they are. Humans are complicated. We are capable of terrible things, but we are also capable of wonderful things. The key is choosing which parts of ourselves we want to express." Lyra was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I believe I owe the Xenopsychology Institute a strongly worded letter." Jake laughed. The medic shot him a disapproving look, but he did not care. The shuttle docked with the naval cruiser Dauntless 40 minutes later. Jake was taken to the medical bay for treatment, and Lyra was given guest quarters while arrangements were made to return her to Valorian space. But before they parted ways, Lyra stopped him in the corridor. "When I return to Valoria," she said, "I will be publishing a new research paper on human behavior. I believe it will challenge many of the assumptions my people have made about your species." Jake smiled. "Just make sure you include the part about grocery stores. I think that is important context." Lyra's facial features shifted into something that might have been a smile. Her species did not have the same musculature as humans, so it was hard to tell for certain. But the warmth in her eyes was unmistakable. "I will," she said. "And I will also include a recommendation that the collective reconsider its relationship with humanity. We have been keeping our distance for too long, based on incomplete information. It is time we got to know you better." She held out her hand, mimicking the human gesture that Jake had offered her in the cave. Jake took it, wrapping his fingers gently around hers. "I look forward to it," he said. 3 months later, Jake received a message on his personal communicator. It was from Lyra. The message contained a link to her newly published research paper, titled "A Reassessment of Human Behavioral Patterns Based on Direct Observation During Extreme Survival Conditions." The paper had apparently caused quite a stir in Valorian academic circles, challenging decades of accepted wisdom about humanity's nature. But it was the personal note at the end of the message that made Jake smile. "You were right," Lyra had written. "Helping people is about doing the right thing. I understand that now. And I wanted to thank you again for teaching me this lesson, even though you did not realize you were doing so. Also, I've attached a list of Valorian cultural foods that I believe you might enjoy. None of them involve consuming sentient beings. I thought you might appreciate this information given your species' apparent sensitivity about such matters. I hope to see you again someday, Jake Morrison, perhaps under circumstances that do not involve imminent freezing to death. Your friend, Lyra." Jake read the message 3 times. Then he pulled up the information on Valorian cultural foods and started planning his next shore leave. The universe was a vast and dangerous place, full of frozen planets and deadly blizzards and species that did not understand each other. But it was also full of unexpected friendships and moments of connection that transcended biological differences. And sometimes all it took was one stranded human and one terrified alien to bridge the gap between worlds. Jake sent his reply. He told Lyra about his recovery from the hypothermia, about the commendation he had received for the rescue, and about his growing interest in Valorian culture. He told her that he would be happy to meet again, anywhere she wanted, and he told her that she was welcome to visit Nebraska any time she liked. It was mostly flat and not very exciting, but it had something that most planets in the galaxy lacked. It had really excellent grocery stores. The end.